Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney and today I've got a rather exciting video for you guys here today because I have tried a new to me fabric fiber and I can't wait to tell you about it. It's from, it was a lot of fun. I have a lot to share with you and then I need you to help me make a decision at the end of this video. So let's get into it. Okay, so when Jenny and I went to Chicago back in April to H&H, we met with a whole bunch of vendors and that sort of thing while we were there. Different people that we could work with here with Tomcat Stitchery. One of the people that we ran into was a company called, or a storefront called Hemp. So Hemptique, and they specialize in hemp fiber. So they sell, like macrame rope, they sell different types of yarn, like different weights of yarn and fabric, as well as a few other things. But it all goes back to the hemp plant. So, and I've just never sewn with hemp before. I've sewn with bamboo, I've sewn with linen, I've sewn with cotton, which are all, bamboo, not as much. We'll talk about that in a second. But these are all vegetable fibers. So vegetable-based fibers, but I had not ever sewn with the hemp. So I was really interested in trying out some of their knits. So they sent me a box of 3 of their knitted patterns, kind of, because they're almost like, they're like a sweater knit. All of these are kind of like a sweater knit. And oh my gosh, fell in love. In fact, I used all 3 in this project. So I took a look at the samples and then picked 2, and then I used one of the samples to do just some of the little details that are around here. So like I said, hemp is probably most similar to linen. So linen, hemp, cotton are a vegetable fiber. And what this means is that it's a plant that they have taken and turned into a thread, spun into yarn, basically, real thin yarn, to then make it into different thicknesses in order to make it into fabric. The reason bamboo is different is because bamboo actually has to go through a chemical process to become a thread, similar to rayon. So rayon is actually wood cellulose, so like wood, like tree, that has gone through a chemical process in order to become a fiber. But the vegetable fibers like this don't have to go through quite that, they don't have to go through that chemical process to become a fiber. They get woven or spun and then turned into the fabric. But because they are vegetable and not protein, so a protein fiber would be wool or silk is a protein fiber. Anything that comes from an animal of some sort is considered a protein fiber. And because these things tend to be a little bit more like hair, for instance, a good comparison to like hair. Well, if you look under a microscope at a wool fiber or a silk, more wool, at a wool fiber, there's a lot of air in a wool fiber, which gives it a little bit of stretch because there's a little bit more give in just the mechanical stretch and it bounces back to its normal size really easy. So it's got a lot of natural recovery in it. Vegetable fibers such as hemp, linen, cotton don't. So in order to make these have that recovery, you really need that addition of spandex, or you just need to take some considerations when sewing it. So this fabric here is 100% hemp. There is no spandex in it. It's just 100% hemp. Now, with the 3 different sweater knits that I've used here, they are knitted in 3 different ways, where some of them have a little bit more stretch. So this one, for instance, that I made for this top, has more stretch because it's a little bit more of an open knit. The rib knit that I used for the waistband and the neckband and the binding here for the sleeves has a little bit more because it is a rib knit. So it's knit purl to purl. And just the way that that's knitted gives it a little bit of mechanical stretch. But because that fiber we don't have that addition of spandex, we don't get the recovery. So it doesn't come back into shape. So because of that, I needed to stick with silhouettes when sewing it that are not close fitting, things that are a little bit roomier, a little bit boxier, things that don't need to stretch to go onto my body, including the neckline. So those were some of the considerations I needed to make, but this is very breathable. It's very similar to linen in that the fiber itself is very breathable, very easy to take care of. You can wash it, you can dry it, you can do all of those things. It softens over time like a linen, so the more you wash and dry it, the more it softens up. It feels absolutely lovely, and it's got some good heft to it. It's got some pretty good weight. So, loved the fabric, so excited about trying it out. Again, it washed and dried up when I washed the yardage beautifully. This is the natural color of hemp. This is the only color that this comes in because this is the natural state when hemp has been made. Nothing else has been done to the color. This is just the color that comes out, which as you can see is kind of a warm taupe. And we'll talk about that kind of at the end of the video. Okay, so when she gave this to me, I knew that I needed to come up with some patterns again that weren't skin tight. Also, before I forget, I'll mention it at the end of the video. I do have a code if you're interested in trying this fabric out yourself. Actually, it's the entire shop. You can use it. But Tomcat, the code Tomcat, is going to get you 15% off your order at checkout. And this code is good through the end of September, September 30th. So if you just want to go try out, if you want to try out their yarn, if you want to try out really anything, use that code and it gets you 15% off the entire store. So just so we know, forget to say that. Okay, so I was looking for patterns, and in my head, honestly, when I had Stephanie over here to do one of my Style with Stephanie videos, in fact, I think it was the last one, she had on this beautiful skirt, long skirt that was in kind of this color, and it was knitted. And I had just gotten the samples of the hemp, and when I saw that on her, I was like, oh my gosh, I want to recreate that skirt. It looks so pretty and like easy to wear. And she's like, oh my gosh, this thing's wonderful. So I knew I wanted to do some sort of an A-line maxi skirt with an elastic waist. And then Jenny and I kind of talked a little bit about it. And I was like, I feel like a grown-on sleeve, just real loose summer sweater would be fantastic for the top. Something kind of cropped, and by cropped on me, I mean like high hip, not cropped, and just real loose and easy to put on. So those were my criteria for the pattern. Now, I received a few years ago now for Christmas the Letterlow system from my mother. It's also called the Golden Rule system. It's basically, I'm actually going to be doing a full video on this in September because I'm also using Letterlow patterns for my Precious Fabric Challenge. So if you follow me on Instagram, you guys have been helping me pick out which precious fabric I'm going to use, which pattern that I'm going to use, which muslin fabric I'm going to use, all that kind of stuff. So that is all happening in September. I'm running this Precious Fabric Challenge, just encouraging everyone to get those precious fabrics out of their stash and onto their bodies. But I'm going to be using the Letterlow system on that, and I'm doing an entire video on how the system actually works. But it's kind of like pattern drafting. The patterns are actually really small, actually. So these are the patterns. So here's the picture of the patterns. And then here are the pattern pieces. And there's a way, and you take your measurements. Again, I'll do a whole video on this, on how you then basically size these up to fit you, depending on your size. So we'll go over all of that again, and I think it's the first Friday in September. We're going to be going over that, so stay tuned on that. But I kind of wanted to play around with the system before I got into that. I knew I wanted to use it for that pattern because I haven't used it at all, and I've been someone on my to-do list to like play around with that. And then Letterlow did reach out to me, and I talked to them at H&H as well, and we decided to do a video together. Again, that's all happening in September, but I wanted to play around with it a little bit more. So I decided to pick two patterns from their pattern catalog that I have to recreate this. So for the top, I actually went with this top pattern, and it doesn't look very similar. And I picked this pattern because I liked the way it had the grown-on sleeve that I wanted, a little bit of a wide neck, and it was just kind of loose and boxy. So I went with this pattern, and then I just didn't put the little gathering, shirring thing there at the bottom. I just cut it off to keep it nice and boxy, and left it at that. So it was very simple. There's literally just a front and a back piece for the pattern pieces on this pattern. Now, one of the things about the Letterlow patterns is that there are 0 sewing instructions. So this is not a beginner-friendly system. You need to know what you're doing. Because I had to make the decision on how I wanted to finish off the neckline and the sleeves. So in figuring that, I used all the tips. So I have a free knit ebook that is on the webpage, and I will leave a link to it down below. It's completely free, a little ebook on sewing with knits. And I used all those tips with the exception of stay tapes. I could not use stay tapes on this project because of the open knit that it would show through. The glue from the back of those would show through on the right side. So I wasn't able to use those, but everything else I used, you know, a walking foot when acceptable, everything, all the other tips that are on there I did use, but I did not use any of the stay tapes because again, just the nature of this fabric. I probably could have if I was making something out of just the rib knit because that's not an open knit, or even this, well, it's kind of got an open knit a little bit of an openness to it. I just didn't want that glue from the back of the stay tapes to come through. I could not have used it on the top. So I did have to make some decisions on how I wanted to finish off the armholes and the neck edge, which is something that comes out of sewing for a while, and not even that long. If you've made a couple of t-shirts, you would be able to figure out how to finish off the armholes and neck edge of this pattern. Just keep that in mind. So for this, originally I thought, well, I'll just bind all of my edges. I'll bind my armholes and I'll bind my neck edge. So that's what I did on my armholes, and I bound it with the rib knit, so it's a different fabric than what the shirt is actually made out of. It's the same as the waistband also on the skirt. So I cut some strips and just bound the edges of the armhole, and I think that that worked really well. Again, this is a drop shoulder, kind of just a slouchy sweater. Technically, drop shoulders are maybe not the best silhouette on my body just because I look top heavy really easy. But I think if I balance that shirt out with volume on the bottom, I'm fine. So the A-line skirt, when I'm wearing these together, I think that it balances it out fine. But for instance, I wouldn't want to wear this top with a pair of leggings or skinny jeans. I would look very top heavy. But if I'm wearing like a baggy jean or a wide leg jean, I think it works. So that's kind of my thought process behind. So I did the armholes, those turned out fine. And then I bound the neck edge, and oh my gosh, it stretched out because again, there's no recovery in this fabric. When I put it on, I was like, oh my gosh, this is, and I should have taken pictures, and I just got stuck in the moment of problem solving and I didn't. But it had stretched 3 inches in the front and 3 inches in the back. The reason for this is that I was sewing with the stretch of the fabric, okay? So with most of the sewing here happened with the stretchiest, the direction of greatest stretch on the fabric, which is the cross grain. So as I was sewing the binding on, it was stretching out that layer, and because I don't have any spandex in the binding, there was nothing to bring it back in. It looked awful. And that didn't happen on the sleeves because I was sewing a majority. I mean, a little bit gets sewn with the stretchy, but not much. Most of it is going vertically with the selvage, you know, parallel to the selvage of the fabric around this armhole. And there's like hardly any stretch in that part of the fabric. So I did not get the stretch out factor with the armholes like I did with the neck. So I got it done, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is completely unwearable. So I had a moment of sitting down and thinking about, okay, how can I fix this? Because I knew just putting a neckband on wasn't going to fix the problem because even though the rib knit stretches, it doesn't have that recovery. So yeah, I could make the neckline or the neckband smaller than my neck edge, and then that would kind of suck it in a little bit, but is the rib knit just going to stretch out because it doesn't have that recovery? So then I had an aha moment, and it has worked perfectly. What I decided to do was add a spandex component, and how I did that was this neckband has elastic in it. In fact, you can kind of see I had this on for church. I think I just need a good wash and a dry. This is bubbling a little bit. It didn't on my body though when I was wearing it to church, but I think a good wash and a dry would be fine. So what I did is I cut my elastic. When I put a neckband into my t-shirts, I like my neckbands to be about 85% the circumference of the neck line, because that makes it smaller, and so it hugs the body really nicely. But obviously, okay, so what I did was I went through and I measured out my elastic to be 85% of the neckline on the pattern. Because remember, I'd stretched this out a good 6 inches. So I went back and just measured the elastic out, 3/8 of an inch elastic, to be 85% the length of the total neckline. And then I cut my binding or my neckband the same length, okay? And then I sewed my neckband like you would, and then folded over on itself. And then I sewed my elastic into a circle as well and put it inside there. So kind of like the same if I were making, the same way I did the waistband on the skirt. So I stuck the elastic in there and then just kind of basted it around the edge to keep it inside. So I just stuck the elastic on the wrong side, folded this around it, and then just treated it like I would any other neckband. And that worked. So that gave it, the elastic brings everything back into shape. And I did use my cover stitch machine to cover stitch that seam allowance down, and that worked really, really well. But that was the trick, putting elastic into the neckband, and it worked amazingly. So that's kind of, and then I did end up chopping a little bit more off the top just to give it, Jenny and I were going, it's so helpful to have her here, because I'm like, okay, folding it up, like, does it need to be this length? Like, does this look like a good length? And she was like, yes. So we did end up cutting it to about high hip, so I can still do the little half tuck on the front if I want, or I can leave it out if I'm wearing it over like baggier jeans or that sort of thing, and I think it'll be fine, short enough on my body. So that was the top. For the skirt, I actually used this pattern just for that, again, the longer skirt piece. And I mean, it's literally the same front and back. It's an A-line skirt, meant for knit fabric, so that helps. And then it did come with a waistband piece. I was trying to think. Did it? Or maybe it just told you to cut a rectangle a certain amount, depending on, yeah, I'm trying to remember now. Anyway, I honestly, I was measuring the waist to make sure that it would fit my waist, because the way you do the letter low patterns is you're using your full bust measurement and your hip measurement. And those are the only measurements you're using when you're drafting out these patterns. And because my hips are usually in a smaller size than my waist, I was worried that the waist was going to be too tight, but actually it was perfect. It worked out perfectly. I didn't have to make any adjustments, so that worked out well. But yeah, I just serged up the sides, cover stitched the hems on both the skirt and the top. And I thought that I might have to shorten this, and I didn't. So I take that back. I ran my fabric, or my fabric was just a little bit not wide enough to go the full length the pattern wanted me to. So in order for it to fit, I think I did take it up. So that's probably why it fits me fine lengthwise. I did take it up a little bit. I mean, it's a maxi skirt, but it is so comfortable and so breathable. I really love this whole outfit. So let's talk about the color a little bit. So pleased with how this turned out. Again, I wore it to church. It worked fantastic. It's so comfortable. It wore great all day. Nothing bagged out on me. It was very, very comfortable. But I can't decide. This is actually not a horrible neutral for me because it's warm. If I want to leave it neutral and wear them together or wear them separately, because I do feel like I have to punch it up with like bright accessories, just to kind of, not so much the color as more as like my personality. Like I just like a lot more color. Or do we dye it? That is what I'm trying to decide right now. Because this is a completely natural fiber, I can just use, well, I could use fancy dyes, or I could just use RIT dye. And the stuff for natural, not the stuff for the polyester, the synthetic, but the natural RIT dye. And I kind of want to play around with that. We've got scraps, so we can play around. Jenny kind of wants to play around too, because she's got some hemp yarn and she wants to dye it. So we want to play around a little bit more with the dye, and I have a dye pot and everything, and I would totally do a video on it about the dyeing process and how I do it if you guys were interested. But here's the question, and I'm actually going to put a poll on my community page on YouTube, probably tomorrow or maybe the day after, so you guys can go vote. So just keep an eye out. I'm going to try and use my community page on YouTube a little bit more. just with little odds and ends. But I want you guys to go vote. If I should dye it a dark red, a dark blue, or leave it. Now, this is, let's remember that we're not starting off with white here, right? Like we're starting off with this warm taupe color. So any color I dye it is gonna go warm. It's gonna go toasted a little bit. So that is something to keep in mind, but I just think a deep dark red could be really cool, and I could see me wearing both pieces together, but also separately. But I also think a dark blue could be good, like almost like a dark cobalt blue could be really cool as well. And I could also see myself wearing those. I also played around with teal a little bit, but with the colors I'm using for fall, I think cobalt would go maybe a little like the dark blue, kind of my navy, but it's not really navy, it's more of just a dark blue. But putting that in there. So those are the options: dark red, dark blue, or leave it. So be thinking about that, and then you can vote in the poll that I'm going to put on my community tab on YouTube, probably tomorrow actually. So you're watching this on Tuesday, probably on Wednesday. Tomorrow I'll put that up on the community tab, and you guys can help me decide. But if I do end up dyeing it, I'll absolutely do a video, because I think that would be interesting for you guys to see, because it can bring new life to things, right? Like if there's something that is in your wardrobe, especially if you had your colors done and you're like, well, this isn't really my purple, you can dye it to maybe the color that is your purple, like warm it up. There's a little bit of limitations depending on what the color of the garment is to begin with, but yeah, it's a fun way to update things and keep new life into your garments. So let me know if that's of interest to you. Okay, that is it. I was very, very pleasantly surprised with using hemp. I would absolutely use it again. I'm interested in trying some hemp woven fabric to see. I'm assuming it's going to behave very similarly to linen. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. So I would be interested to try some woven now as well, but absolutely recommend the knit fabric. Just use it with things that don't need to have a lot of recovery, or if you do have places that need recovery, add elastic. And again, if you want to go over to Hemp, we'll leave a link down to their shop for you to get there. But if you want to use the code Tomcat at checkout, that will give you 15% off your cart. So yeah, go have a look. Take a gander. Maybe there's some other things there that might be of interest to you as well. They were really fun to work with, and it's a wonderful like natural fiber. So if natural fibers are your thing, I would absolutely go check it out. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. I will see you all again on Friday. And I'm trying to think what Friday's video is. Well, you'll just be surprised. All right, guys, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I will see you guys again on Friday. Happy sewing!